Montana Territory, late autumn, 1883. The wind was sharp as a blade and carried the scent of snow when Kaia Bellamy dropped to her knees in the dirt outside the old barn, cradling her fevered son in her arms. She pressed a damp cloth to Nathaniel's burning forehead, her heart thudding louder than the wind rattling the barn door behind her. He was barely 5, his chest rising in short, shallow breaths, lips dry, cheeks flushed. The fever had come fast 2 nights ago, and now he was slipping, his tiny body limp and too quiet. There was no one left to help. Her nearest neighbor, Mrs. Daltrey, had ridden south last week to visit her daughter near Miles City, and the doctor in town had gone east on a supply run. Kaia had sent a rider to fetch him, but there had been no word since. She should have gone inside, but the barn felt closer to something safe. The house, hollow and cold, reminded her too much of her husband's last day. Gone 6 months now, buried under a cottonwood tree out back, his boots still hanging in the porch corner. Kaia pulled her shawl tighter and rocked Nathaniel gently, whispering, "Hold on, baby. Just hold on for Mama." The barn door creaked behind her as another gust hit and she squinted into the wind. That was when she heard it. Hoofbeats. A lone rider was crossing the rise near the fence line. She stood fast, shielding Nathaniel with her body, unsure if she should yell or run. The man dismounted before she could decide. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, his coat dusty from the trail. He looked younger than she first thought, maybe 30, with tired eyes and a kindness in his face that made her throat catch. "Ma'am," he called, already moving toward her. "Is the boy sick?" Kaia didn't answer, just knelt again and looked back at her son. The cowboy dropped beside them without hesitation. "Name's Fletcher Tate. I got some supplies in my saddlebag, quinine, clean water. I came from Red Lodge, been riding through since yesterday." Kaia's voice cracked. "He's burning up. I do not know what else to do." "I do," Fletcher said gently. "Let me help." He worked quick and sure, setting water to boil over a fire he built right there in the dirt beside them. From his bag came a wrapped bundle of herbs, strips of bark, and a vial of bitter medicine. As Kaia held Nathaniel's head, Fletcher coaxed a few drops between the boy's lips. When Nathaniel coughed, weak but responsive, Kaia let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "You're not just passing through," she said, wiping her face. Fletcher gave a little shrug. "I was. But not anymore." She looked up at him sharply. He met her eyes and held them. "You afraid I will stay?" he asked. "No," she said quietly. "I am afraid you will leave." The wind kicked again, but they did not move. Nathaniel stirred, murmured something, then slipped into a deeper sleep, his breathing easier. Kaia pressed her lips to his hair. Fletcher stood and offered her a hand. "Let us get the boy inside." She hesitated, then took it. Inside the house it was warmer. Fletcher carried Nathaniel to the quilted bed and helped Kaia mix more medicine. He moved like someone who had done this before. "You a doctor?" she asked as they worked. "No," he said. "My ma was a midwife in Kansas. I watched her save more folks than any doctor ever did." Kaia looked at him, really looked. The faint scar across his brow, the slow way he smiled. He looked like someone who had lost things too, but he did not wear it heavy. She leaned against the doorframe once Nathaniel was settled. "You saved him?" "Not yet," Fletcher said, "but I am going to try." Kaia's eyes filled again, but she blinked fast and turned away. "You got anyone else here?" he asked. "No, just us." Fletcher nodded once. "Then I will stay until he is better." She was not sure what it was that made her believe him. Maybe it was how he said it, like it was not a question. That night, Kaia sat by Nathaniel's bed while Fletcher took the floor nearby. The house was quiet except for the wind and the soft murmur of the fire in the hearth. At some point, she must have dozed. When she woke, the first pale light of dawn was breaking through the window, and Nathaniel was still asleep, his brow cooler beneath her hand. Kaia stood stiffly and turned around. Fletcher was awake, watching her. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, voice too raw to speak. He gave her a small smile. "Told you I would help." Kaia crossed the room slowly. She stopped in front of him, her hands trembling. You did not have to stop, she said. I know, he said. Why did you? Fletcher looked at her for a long moment. Because I saw you kneeling there, holding that boy like the world was ending, and I could not ride past that. Kaia's breath caught. I have been on the trail so long, he said. I forgot what it felt like to want to stay. She touched his hand just once, his fingers curled around hers gently. I am glad you did not forget, she whispered. He smiled, and for the first time in months the house did not feel hollow. Outside, the wind settled. The snow held off. And inside, for the first time in a long time, Kaia Bellamy felt like something was beginning. Nathaniel stirred near mid-morning, his eyes blinking slow and dazed beneath the weight of fever's retreat. Kaia had been sitting beside the bed, her hands too still in her lap, watching the boy's breath rise and fall with a rhythm steadier than yesterday. He's asking for water, Fletcher said softly from across the room. Kaia rose, legs stiff from the hours folded beneath her. She poured from the kettle left near the hearth, letting it cool before lifting it to her son's lips. Nathaniel drank weakly, and when he pushed the tin cup away, Kaia kissed his brow without thinking. It was damp, not burning. She turned, met Fletcher's eyes. He nodded once, silent. After settling the child with a folded quilt at his side, she stepped onto the porch. Fletcher followed, closing the door behind them with care. A gray light spread across the hills, and the sky held the thickness of coming snow. You got cattle? He asked, scanning the yard. 3 head left. Sold the rest back in August to cover seed. The coops near empty, hens stopped laying regular. Fletcher leaned on the railing. You plan to stay through winter? Kaia crossed her arms. This is all I have. He waited, not speaking. She looked toward the barn. My husband built this place with his father. We married in that room where Nathaniel sleeps. I buried him near the cottonwood when the ground was still soft. I won't leave him there alone. Fletcher ran a hand over his face. Then you'll need help. She didn't answer right away. The wind pulled at her skirts. I can fix the roof on the smokehouse, he added. And that fence is leaning bad on the west side. You offering wages? She asked, voice flat. No, I'm offering what I've got: 2 hands, a steady horse, and time. She studied him. You looking to settle? I wasn't, he said, but that don't mean I can't. Inside, Nathaniel called weakly. Kaia turned to go in but paused at the door. My husband's shirts still hang behind the stove, boots too. If you're staying, you'll find your own space. I've slept colder, Fletcher said. I can bed down in the barn. She hesitated. There's a cot in the storeroom. It's clean. You can take that. He nodded. I'll bring my gear in before the weather turns. That evening, Kaia stirred cornmeal over the stove while Fletcher sat nearby, whittling a sliver of pine into the start of something small, a horse, maybe, or a dog. Nathaniel slept with his hand curled under his chin, color returning to his cheeks. Fletcher didn't speak much, but his presence filled the quiet with a kind of steadiness Kaia hadn't known she'd missed. When she passed him a bowl, he took it with a quiet thank you, then waited until she had her own before lifting his spoon. After supper, Kaia checked the fire, added more wood, and turned to find Fletcher watching her. You gonna make it through this winter? He asked. I always do, she said. But you don't have to alone. She met his gaze, and something softened in her, something she hadn't let near the surface in a long while. I don't know what we are, she said after a moment. Strangers still, mostly, he nodded, but we're starting something. She didn't look away. You sure about that? I've never been more. Kaia didn't answer, but she didn't need to. She reached for the lantern and led him down the hallway to the storeroom, where the cot stood in the corner beneath the narrow window. She set the lantern on the crate beside it, then turned to leave. At the doorway, she paused. My son's known nothing but hard years. Fletcher stood slowly. Then let's give him better ones. She didn't speak, only closed the door behind her. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow. Inside, the house held warmth enough to last the night. The snow settled thick by morning, muffling the world in a hush that felt almost reverent. Fletcher rose early, his breath visible in the storeroom's dim light. He dressed by the warmth of a lantern, pulling on his coat before stepping outside, boots crunching over fresh drifts. Kaia was already in the barn, sleeves rolled and hair pulled back, coaxing the last cow toward the trough. She didn't startle when he came in, only glanced up with a nod. "You sleep?" she asked, brushing straw from her skirt. "Enough," he said. "You?" She looked down at her hands. "Some?" He moved to the hayrack, tossing feed in measured swipes. The silence between them wasn't strained, only full. Kaia shifted her weight. "Roof's holding so far, I checked before you came out." "Good," Fletcher said, tying off the feed sack. "I'll clear the lean-to after breakfast." "Snow's too heavy to let it sit." She folded her arms, watching him. "You always this steady?" He met her eyes. "Only when it matters." Kaia didn't answer, but something in her posture eased just slightly. By midday, the wind had died down. Fletcher worked through the yard, shoulders hunched against the cold, mending the lean to sagging supports with salvaged planks from a broken gate. Kaia brought out a tin of coffee and a biscuit wrapped in cloth. She didn't linger, just left it on the fence post and turned back toward the house. He watched her go, then took the biscuit in his hands. It was still warm. Inside, Nathaniel sat propped on the settee near the hearth, coloring in the edge of an old almanac with a stub of charcoal. He looked up when Fletcher came in, eyes brighter than they'd been in days. "You got a horse?" he asked. Fletcher pulled off his gloves. "Sure do, name's Birch. He's out in the barn now," Nathaniel nodded solemnly. "Ma says I can't ride till spring." "That's smart," Fletcher said, lowering himself to the other chair. "Snow's no place for little boots." The boy considered him, head tilted. "You gonna stay for Christmas?" Fletcher glanced toward the kitchen where Kaia was spooning beans into a pot. "That up to your ma," Nathaniel shrugged. "I think she likes you." Kaia's voice came from the doorway. "Don't go putting words in my mouth, Nat." Nathaniel grinned and went back to his coloring. Fletcher stood. "I'll haul in firewood." She followed him to the door, holding it open. "He doesn't warm to folks fast." Fletcher stepped out onto the porch. "Seems he's got good reason." Kaia leaned against the frame, arms folded. "He hasn't had anyone stick." He looked out over the white, wrapped yard, then back at her. "I'm not just passing through." She didn't look away. "I don't know what to do with that." He stepped down onto the packed path. "You don't have to yet." She watched him go, the door swinging shut behind her as the cold rolled in. That evening, Fletcher brought in a bundle of kindling, shaking snow from his coat. Kaia had set potatoes to roast in the coals, and the smell filled the small house. Nathaniel was asleep again, curled under a quilt on the couch. Kaia stirred the pot and glanced over. "You ever have a family?" Fletcher stacked the wood by the hearth. "Had a younger sister. She married a blacksmith near Abilene." "Haven't seen her in years." "You run from something?" she asked, voice low. He didn't answer right away. The fire popped softly. "No," he said finally. "I just kept moving after the war, didn't know how to stop." Kaia handed him a tin plate and a spoon. "Maybe you do now." They ate in quiet, the fire painting flickers on the walls. Later, she folded Nathaniel's quilt tighter and sat beside him. Fletcher watched her, then looked down at his hands. "You're not like most folks," he said. She didn't look up. "That's supposed to be kind, it's true." Kaia brushed hair back from her son's brow. "I've had to be different. I wasn't raised for this life, not really. My father taught piano in St. Paul. I wore gloves to supper." Fletcher tilted his head. "What brought you west?" "I did," she said. "I wanted something real, not parlors and polite talk." He studied her in the firelight. "And did you find it?" Her eyes met his steady. "I think I might have." Outside, the wind had quieted altogether. The snow lay smooth across the yard, untouched. Inside, the warmth held. Fletcher rose and moved to the door. He paused with one hand on the frame. "I'll be here in the morning," he said. Kaia didn't nod or speak. She just watched him go, her hand resting over her son's back, her gaze holding a glint of something new, something quietly, unmistakably hopeful. The next week settled into a rhythm as quiet and grounding as the snow that blanketed the hills. With Nathaniel gaining strength by the hour, Kaia found herself less tethered to fear and more to the pulse of the days measured in wood chopped, soup stirred, and the sound of Fletcher's boots crossing the porch at dusk. One afternoon, with the sky heavy and low, she found him in the shed behind the barn, sleeves rolled and sawdust clinging to his shirt. A rough pine cradle stood in the corner, half-built and sturdy. Kaia leaned against the doorframe. "You building for someone?" He looked up from the plane in his hand. "No one but the boy. He's too big for it now, I know, but I figure something solid in the house might ease your mind when storms roll through." She stepped inside, trailing fingers along the rail. "You ever carved before?" "Some," he said, setting the plane aside. "I built fence for a man outside Emporia who liked the posts sanded smooth enough to run a hand down without catching a splinter. Taught me patience." Kaia smiled faintly. "That the same man teach you to build cradles?" "No," Fletcher said, wiping his hands. "That was a woman. Midwife near Topeka. I used to haul water for her in exchange for supper. Every time she helped a birth, she made something by hand for the child before she left." Kaia looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You've carried a lot of someone else's stories." He met her gaze, tone steady. "They're part of mine now." That evening, Nathaniel sat upright in the kitchen, blanket wrapped around his legs, watching as Fletcher peeled apples into a pail. Kaia was kneading dough at the table. "You always this handy with a blade." Fletcher glanced at the neat peel curling into the pail. "Spent enough nights hungry to learn how not to waste the good parts." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Can you make a pie?" Fletcher looked at Kaia. "Can we?" She wiped flour from her hands. "If you find the tin, I'll heat the oven." While the fire built in the stove, Fletcher showed Nathaniel how to press the dough into the pan just so. The boy's small hands fumbled, but his grin stretched wide as the crust took shape. Kaia stood at the counter, watching the two of them from the side. For a moment she didn't speak. "Do you miss where you came from?" she asked quietly. Fletcher didn't answer straight away. He folded the last edge of dough before turning. "Some days I miss the sound of cicadas when dusk settles." "But I don't miss what I left," she nodded, her hands resting still at her sides. "Do you?" he asked. Kaia hesitated. "No, I miss some people, but not the life." The pie went into the oven, and the smell of cinnamon and warm fruit filled the house. Later, when Nathaniel had fallen asleep in the chair with his head leaning against a cushion, Fletcher brought Kaia a plate with a slice still steaming. She took it, sitting near the hearth. He settled across from her, plate balanced on one knee. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked. She blew on the crust before answering. "Not until lately." Fletcher waited. Kaia kept her eyes on the fire. "I thought the hardest part was surviving him dying, but it's not. It's waking up after and realizing you still have years ahead and no map for them." "You don't need a map," Fletcher said, "just someone willing to walk beside you." She looked up then and for the first time didn't guard her face. "I've got a boy to raise, a homestead to hold. I can't afford almosts." "I'm not an almost," he said. The room went quiet again, save for the soft pop of burning logs. Kaia set her plate down. "You need somewhere to sleep that isn't a cot. I'll sleep wherever you let me stay." She rose slowly, crossed the room, and stood in front of him. "Then stay here," she said. "With us?" Fletcher reached for her hand, and when she let him take it, her fingers closed around his without hesitation. "I will," he said, and somehow it felt like a vow. The snow began to recede in slow, dissolving patches, pulling away from the base of the cottonwood and the eaves of the barn. March came with a muddy thaw, and with it, a tremble of green at the edges of the world. Fletcher split fence rails while Kaia mended a broken hinge on the henhouse, her sleeves rolled high, fingers raw from wind and wire. Nathaniel followed close on their heels most mornings, dragging a stick behind him in the melting drifts, quieter now, but stronger. He'd taken to asking Fletcher questions about things Kaia couldn't always answer: the names of birds overhead, the way to tell when a storm was coming by the smell of the air. Fletcher always answered, never talking down, never speaking over. The day the wagon arrived from town, the one Kaia had thought might never return, she stood on the porch with a folded list in hand. Fletcher stepped beside her, brushing the dirt from his palms. "You need me to go with you?" She didn't look up from the paper. You trust me with a team. If you trusted me with your son, Fletcher said, then I trust you with 2 mules. Kaia glanced up, eyes catching his just long enough to hold. I'll be back by dusk, he nodded. We'll keep the fire going. At the general store, she gathered what she needed: sugar, flour, seed packets, a new kettle to replace the one with the cracked handle, and paid with the silver she'd tucked into an oilskin after the last cattle sale. As she turned to leave, a voice called her name. Kaia Bellamy, thought that might be you. She turned to find Clara McDowell, her cousin's widow, wrapped in a dark shawl, a boy of about 10 at her side. They hadn't spoken in years, not since Kaia had chosen to marry a man without land or inheritance. I heard about Samuel, Clara said, her face softening. I'm sorry. Kaia nodded once. Clara hesitated, then added, folks said you might sell the place, start over east. I'm not leaving, Kaia said. We've put down roots. Clara raised a brow. Kaia didn't answer. She didn't need to. That evening she returned just after sunset, the wagon bed full, the mules crusted with dried sweat. Fletcher met her at the hitching post, Nathaniel bundled in a coat too big, his cheeks red from the cold. Everything all right? Fletcher asked, taking the reins. Kaia climbed down slowly, brushing hay from her skirt. Ran into someone who thought I'd given up. Fletcher's jaw ticked, but he said nothing. She stepped closer. I told her I hadn't, Kaia said, and that I wouldn't. He touched her elbow gently. Good. Later, while Nathaniel slept and the wind pressed soft against the windows, Kaia stood in the kitchen, rolling out dough on the table. Fletcher dried the dishes beside her, hands steady. She said I should think about going east, Kaia said, not looking up. Fletcher set down the towel. You want to? She shook her head. No part of me wants to leave this place, but I think she reminded me how many people still expect me to. Then let them, he said. They don't live here, we do. She looked up at the word, we. I never pictured this, Kaia said. Not after Sam. I thought the rest of my life would be holding things together with both hands and no rest. I can't promise ease, Fletcher said, but I can promise I won't let you hold it alone. She stepped toward him, her hands still dusted with flour. You've kept every word so far. I meant everyone. She reached up, brushing her fingers along the side of his jaw. Then stay, not just through spring, not just until the boy's grown. He drew her close, his hands firm at her waist. I don't want anywhere else. When he kissed her, it was slow and certain, like a door opening that would never shut again. In the months that followed, the house filled in with color kaffir lilies blooming near the porch. Carrots and onions stretching in neat rows behind the barn. Fletcher built a new chicken coop from salvaged timber, and Kaia painted its door blue. Nathaniel took to riding birch with Fletcher's careful hand steady at the reins, his laughter carrying over the pasture like a bell. They taught him how to read the wind, how to carve his name in a fence post without splintering the wood, how to listen when someone spoke from the heart. That summer, Kaia and Fletcher stood hand in hand beneath the cottonwood, where the ground had softened again with the season. They didn't speak vows aloud. There was no preacher, no paper, but every glance, every shared silence, every calloused palm said enough. They buried wildflower seeds around Samuel's grave, not in mourning but in peace. Kaia placed her hand on the wooden cross, the other holding Fletcher's. One morning in late August, with the sun rising slow and golden over the ridgeline, Kaia stood on the porch, a quilt around her shoulders. Fletcher stepped out behind her, pressed a mug into her hands, and kissed the curve of her neck. We've done something good here, she said. He rested a hand over her belly, where new life stirred inside her. And it's only just beginning. They watched the land stretch out before them, familiar, weathered, and wholly theirs. Together they turned toward the day, the boy still sleeping, the fire still warm, and the promise of everything ahead wrapping around them like morning light.